Hello tonight. You travel back more than 4,000 years to a quiet stretch of earth beside the lower Yellow River, where mist moves slowly across the dark plains and one of ancient China's earliest forgotten cultures quietly begins to breathe beneath the stars. In this distant world, long before emperors, silk roads, or towering palace walls, small communities shape clay, follow rivers, and watch the seasons turn with patient eyes. You stand beside the broad wetlands of northern China as evening settles softly across the quiet land. The air feels warmer than the modern world, shaped by a wetter climate that once covered these plains with gentle rain and seasonal flooding. The soil beneath your feet looks dark and fertile, like fresh coffee grounds resting after breakfast. A pale layer of fog drifts slowly over the reeds beside the riverbank, softening the edges of the sleeping landscape. Wild grasses sway beneath the cool night wind while shallow pools reflect the moonlight like polished stone mirrors. Somewhere far away, frogs croak calmly with the confidence of creatures untouched by deadlines, taxes, or crowded morning traffic. So, before you get completely comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel, but only if you truly enjoy what we're creating here. And as you settle in tonight, feel free to share your local time and location in the comments below. It is always comforting to imagine listeners scattered across different cities and quiet bedrooms around the world, all slowly drifting together into the same ancient landscape while the modern world hums softly outside their windows. Now, slowly dim the lights. Perhaps turn on a fan, letting the steady hum of the air fill the room, and in that gentle rhythm, we quietly step into tonight's journey together. You walk along the edge of a shallow stream flowing toward the Yellow River. Known in China as the Huanghe 4,000 years ago, this river behaves differently from the modern waterway seen today. Geological evidence suggests the climate remains warmer and more humid during parts of the late Neolithic era, creating broad floodplains where farming villages slowly emerge beside fertile soil, carried by seasonal rains. The Longshan culture gradually forms across these northern plains between roughly 3000 and 1900 BCE. Archaeologists first identified traces of this civilization in Shandong province during excavations in the early 20th century. What remains today are fragments of pottery, buried foundations, ancient graves, and compacted earth walls, all resting silently beneath layers of time like forgotten pages inside a sleeping library. You notice how quiet the landscape feels before the rise of kingdoms and imperial courts. There are no stone roads crowded with armies, no bronze palace bells ringing through crowded capitals. Instead, there are clusters of modest homes made from packed earth and timber, arranged carefully near water sources where families grow millet, raise pigs, and shape their lives around the rhythm of changing seasons. Inside one village, smoke rises slowly through small roof openings as evening meals are prepared over simple hearth fires. Clay pots simmer with grains and vegetables gathered from nearby fields, while children rest near woven baskets filled with seeds for the next planting season. Somewhere nearby, a dog probably steals scraps from dinner with the same timeless confidence displayed by modern kitchen pets everywhere. The ground beneath these settlements remains unusually fertile because the Yellow River carries heavy sediment from distant highlands. Each flood leaves behind new layers of dark silt, renewing the fields year after year. Scientists studying ancient pollen samples believe the surrounding environment once supported thicker vegetation and wetter grasslands than much of northern China supports today. You continue across the plain beneath a sky crowded with stars untouched by artificial light. The silence here feels deep but never empty. Crickets pulse steadily through the darkness, reeds rustle beside narrow waterways, and occasional footsteps pass softly along worn dirt paths connecting one settlement to another. Life moves slowly, without hurry, almost like a long breath held gently through the night. Archaeologists remain especially fascinated by Longshan pottery, particularly the famous black ceramic vessels discovered in burial sites and village ruins. These delicate pieces are often called eggshell pottery because some walls measure less than 1 millimeter thick. Even modern experts sometimes compare their craftsmanship to fine porcelain, which is remarkable considering these vessels are created thousands of years before advanced kilns become common. You can almost picture a potter seated beside a spinning wheel late in the evening, shaping wet clay beneath the glow of firelight. Their hands move steadily and carefully, guided by years of repetition and observation. The finished vessels appear elegant and balanced, with smooth dark surfaces polished until they reflect flickering light like still water beneath a midnight sky. Many Longshan communities build rammed earth, walls around their settlements as populations slowly increase beside the yellow river plains. These walls are not always signs of dramatic warfare filled with shouting soldiers and flaming arrows. More often, they reflect organized labor, flood management, and the practical need to protect crops, storage pits, and pathways connecting active farming regions together. As generations pass, Longshan society gradually becomes more organized and layered beneath the calm rhythm of village life. Certain graves contain polished jade ornaments, delicate black pottery, and ceremonial objects suggesting higher social status among some individuals. Yet these differences remain subtle. Without the enormous palaces or towering monuments later, dynasties construct proudly for historians, and tourists carrying cameras through museum halls. You pause beside a quiet burial ground where ancient families once placed their loved ones beneath the earth with gentle ritual and patient care. Archaeologists later uncover arranged pottery, stone tools, and ornaments resting beside the dead, reflecting beliefs about continuity beyond mortal life. Even here, memory feels soft and enduring, like thin smoke rising slowly into the cold evening sky above. Far beyond the village fields, rivers continue shifting across the northern plains beneath changing skies and distant storms. Wetlands expand and retreat with the climate, while generations quietly adapt beside the water. Tonight, the Longshan culture feels less like a vanished civilization and more like a quiet beginning, where human life first learns to endure beside the endless rhythm of the riverbanks. The evening sun lowers gently across the northern plains, spreading long bands of amber light over the fields beside the yellow river. You move quietly through a landscape that feels settled and familiar, where the Longshan communities continue many traditions first shaped by the older Dawenkou culture. Nothing changes suddenly here. One generation simply folds softly into the next, like layers of silk carefully placed inside an old wooden chest. The villages remain small, but they feel deeply rooted in the earth around them. Narrow dirt paths curve between homes built from packed soil and timber frames, while storage pits rest beneath woven roofs heavy with drying grain. The air carries the scent of wet earth and cooking fires, mixed with the distant sweetness of river reeds swaying slowly beside shallow water. You walk past wide fields of millet stretching toward the horizon beneath a pale evening sky. Archaeologists believe millet serves as one of the primary crops throughout northern China during this era, thriving in the fertile Loess soil carried by ancient winds and river floods. Nearby, early rice cultivation also appears in wetter regions, quietly expanding the agricultural rhythm supporting these growing communities. The work of farming follows a calm and repetitive cycle that rarely changes from season to season. Families wake before sunrise, tend the fields beneath drifting clouds, then return home carrying baskets of grain balanced carefully across their shoulders. The entire process feels steady and measured, almost like listening to an old clock tick softly in another room while rain falls outside. As darkness slowly gathers over the plain, smoke rises from dozens of hearth fires across the settlement. The thin gray streams drift upward into the cooling air, blending gently into the evening mist. Somewhere nearby, a tired farmer probably sits down after a long day and realizes with quiet disappointment that someone forgot to refill the water jar again. Proving ancient households are surprisingly familiar. You notice how carefully these villages are arranged beside streams and low riverbanks. Water shapes everything here, from farming schedules to cooking routines and burial customs. Geological studies suggest the climate remains relatively warm and humid during much of this period, allowing wetlands, grasses, and fertile floodplains to support stable agricultural life across large sections of northern China. The older Dawenkou culture, which flourishes before the rise of Longshan society, leaves behind many customs that continue quietly through these later generations. Archaeologists uncover elegant pottery, polished stone tools, and carefully structured graves from Dawenkou sites dating back nearly 6,000 years. Rather than disappearing, many of these traditions seem to flow naturally into the daily life of emerging Longshan communities. You enter a quiet burial area, positioned carefully beyond the edge of the village fields. The graves here are not scattered randomly across the landscape. Instead, many appear deliberately arranged, reflecting a belief that the relationship between the living and the dead continues gently beyond the visible world. Even thousands of years later, the organization of these burial grounds still feels deeply thoughtful and calm. Inside several excavated graves, archaeologists discover pottery vessels, ornaments, bone tools, and polished jade objects placed beside the deceased. These items likely serve symbolic or spiritual purposes, though the exact meanings remain uncertain today. The objects rest silently beneath the soil for centuries, preserved so carefully that modern researchers sometimes compare excavation work to opening a sealed letter from another age. The pottery itself reveals remarkable skill and patience. Longshan craftsmen continue refining techniques inherited from earlier cultures, shaping vessels with thinner walls and smoother surfaces over time. Some bowls appear almost impossibly delicate beneath museum lighting today. Looking at them closely, you might honestly wonder whether ancient potters possessed steadier hands than people attempting smartphone screen protectors in the modern world. Night settles more fully across the settlement as families gather indoors, beneath low earthen roofs. Firelight flickers softly against walls reinforced with timber and packed clay, creating warm shadows that move gently through each room. Children listen quietly while older relatives speak about changing weather patterns, successful harvests, and distant villages located farther along the winding river paths. The rhythm of these communities depends not on conquest or rapid expansion, but on consistency. Crops are planted at predictable times. Storage pits are carefully maintained before winter arrives. Fishing nets dry beside the riverbanks while pottery wheels turn slowly beneath open shelters. Every repeated task contributes to a stable existence that stretches peacefully across generations. Like an unbroken thread, you continue walking beside a narrow stream illuminated by moonlight, reflecting softly across the water. Insects hum steadily through the reeds, while frogs call from hidden pools along the muddy banks. There is no sharp boundary between humanity and nature here. The settlements feel woven into the landscape itself, as though the villages grow naturally from the earth alongside the grasses and trees. Archaeological discoveries suggest that some Longshan communities gradually develop more organized social structures across the northern plains. Certain graves contain richer pottery, jade ornaments, and ceremonial tools, revealing subtle differences in status among families or local leaders. Still, authority remains closely connected to ritual life, agriculture, and cooperation rather than dramatic warfare or powerful military rule. Inside a quiet courtyard, a woman smooths wet clay across the surface of a large storage jar while grain dries nearby beneath woven mats. Her careful movements reflect years of repetition and patience beside the river settlements. Close beside her, a child traces patterns into soft dirt, completely unaware that future archaeologists will study these villages wearing extremely impractical hats beneath summer sunlight. The seasons continue moving steadily across northern China with calm and familiar rhythm. Summer rains darken the fertile soil beside the rivers, autumn winds sweep gently across harvested fields, and winter frost settles softly over sleeping farmland awaiting spring. Through every cycle, Longshan communities survive by adapting carefully to nature and the quiet breathing rhythm of the surrounding world. As night deepens over the ancient plains, the villages slowly fall silent beneath pale mist and distant stars. Smoke drifts upward from fading hearth fires, while footsteps disappear quietly behind earthen walls beside the riverbanks. In this calm world shaped by patience and repetition, the earliest foundations of northern Chinese civilization continue growing gently through grain fields, flowing water, and human memory. Night arrives slowly across the Longshan villages, settling over the earth with the patience of falling dust. You stand beneath a sky filled with quiet stars while narrow waterways circle the settlements like dark ribbons of still water. Thick rammed earth walls rise gently around the homes, not harsh or imposing, but calm and dependable, like the steady sides of an old farmhouse weathering another peaceful winter. The villages appear carefully planned in ways that still surprise modern archaeologists. Excavations at Taosi and Chengxiai reveal organized roads, designated craft areas, drainage systems, and layered defensive walls built with remarkable precision. Long before imperial capitals rise across China, these communities already understand how shared spaces can shape daily life into something orderly, cooperative, and quietly efficient. You walk along a packed dirt pathway, illuminated by faint moonlight slipping between roof lines. The homes remain modest, yet thoughtfully arranged beside workshops, storage pits, and communal areas where villagers gather after sunset. Nothing feels accidental here. Even the placement of wells and grain storage reflects a growing awareness that survival depends not only on nature, but also on careful planning. At the outer edge of the settlement, shallow moats curve beside the walls, collecting rainwater and slowing movement across the muddy ground. Archaeologists believe some villages strengthen these barriers over generations as populations increase throughout the region. Yet the atmosphere still feels calm rather than militarized, more like neighbors quietly locking doors at night than kingdoms preparing for endless conquest and dramatic trumpet music. A cool breeze moves across the fields surrounding the settlement, carrying the scent of damp soil and distant cooking fires. Crickets hum steadily beneath the reeds while frogs call softly from irrigation channels beside the farmland. The soundscape remains gentle and repetitive, creating the strange feeling that time itself has begun slowing down somewhere beneath the stars above northern China. Inside one pottery workshop, a craftsman turns a simple wheel beneath flickering firelight. His hands move carefully across wet clay, shaping elegant black vessels with astonishing control and patience. The famous Longshan pottery emerges from movements repeated countless times over many years, refined slowly through observation rather than written instruction. Much like a family recipe, nobody measures correctly, but somehow always remembers perfectly. The finished vessels appear graceful, even by modern standards. Some bowls curve so delicately that archaeologists still marvel at their thin walls and polished surfaces. These pieces are not only practical tools for storage or cooking, they also carry a quiet sense of beauty, reflecting a culture that values balance, symmetry, and precision long before such ideas become central to later Chinese philosophy and artistic tradition. You continue deeper into the village where small hearth fires glow inside earth-packed homes. Families gather around simple evening meals of millet porridge, vegetables, and occasionally pork raised within nearby enclosures. The atmosphere feels peaceful and familiar. A child yawns beside the fire while an older relative quietly repairs a woven basket that has probably survived at least 3 unnecessary attempts to improve it. Archaeological discoveries at Taosi suggest some settlements may contain early forms of ceremonial or administrative centers. Certain structures appear larger and more carefully arranged than ordinary homes, possibly serving ritual gatherings or communal decision-making. These findings hint at increasingly organized social systems, though life here still moves at the rhythm of farming seasons rather than strict political authority. You notice how deeply connected the villages remain to the surrounding environment. Water channels guide irrigation through nearby fields, while seasonal flooding deposits fresh layers of fertile soil across the plains. The people understand the river intimately because their survival depends on reading its moods carefully. In many ways, the Yellow River functions less like a boundary and more like a living companion shaping every aspect of daily existence. The stars overhead shine with unusual clarity in this ancient world, untouched by artificial light. Some archaeologists believe communities like Taosi observe celestial patterns carefully, possibly using astronomy to guide agricultural timing and ritual activity. Looking upward beside these villages, you can imagine generations quietly tracking seasonal movements across the night sky with patient and thoughtful attention. Beyond the walls, the farmland stretches outward beneath silver moonlight. Millet stalks sway gently in the wind, while narrow footpaths divide the fields into careful sections cultivated by different households. Farming remains the foundation of everything here. Even specialized craftsmen and community leaders depend ultimately on successful harvests, steady rainfall, and the quiet labor performed daily beneath the open sky. Near a village workshop, several craftsmen polish pottery surfaces with smooth stones before placing the vessels into carefully managed kiln fires. The process demands patience and precision because even small temperature changes can crack delicate ceramics. Watching them work feels deeply calming. Nobody rushes through the task, and every movement follows a steady, practiced rhythm. Longshan society continues growing more organized with each passing generation, though the transformation remains gradual and quiet. Roads become more structured, specialized crafts expand, and settlements increase in size and coordination. Archaeologists studying Chengxiai discover multiple construction layers showing how communities evolve patiently over centuries while adapting to environmental pressures and population growth without losing stability. You walk beside storage pits lined with compacted clay, carefully designed to protect grain from moisture and pests throughout the year. These practical innovations reveal generations of accumulated knowledge shared across communities. Successful harvest storage often determines survival during difficult seasons, reminding you that civilizations frequently depend more upon ordinary planning than upon extraordinary rulers or legendary achievements. As darkness deepens across the settlement, the village gradually melts into the surrounding landscape. Firelight dims behind earthen walls while insects sing softly and the night embraces everything. Firelight glows faintly behind woven door coverings while insects sing steadily through nearby grasslands. Thick earth walls soften every sound, creating an atmosphere so peaceful that even your footsteps feel unusually loud against the quiet stillness resting beneath the stars. In many ways, Longshan society resembles a calm river crossing a wide plain beneath an endless sky. Families work, craftsmen create, leaders organize, and children slowly grow into adults who repeat familiar patterns through changing seasons. Nearby, a pottery kiln releases its final warmth into the night while water moves silently through the moat, carrying life forward without hurry. The night air feels cooler inside the packed earth homes of the Longshan settlements, where thick walls hold back the heat of the day like quiet guardians of stillness. You sit beside the soft glow of a fire while an artisan bends patiently over a piece of pale green jade. For weeks, perhaps even months, careful hands polish the stone little by little until it catches the light like frozen water beneath the moon. Unlike softer minerals shaped quickly with metal tools in later centuries, jade requires extraordinary patience. Ancient craftsmen grind and smooth the stone using sand, water, and abrasive surfaces, repeating the same movements countless times. Archaeologists studying Longshan jade objects often describe them as evidence not only of technical skill but also of remarkable discipline, the kind modern people usually reserve for assembling furniture without losing instructions halfway through. You watch as the craftsman pauses occasionally to examine the surface beneath flickering firelight. The room smells faintly of smoke, damp clay, and polished stone dust drifting gently through the air. Outside, insects hum beyond the village walls, while distant footsteps move along narrow pathways. Everything in this world seems connected to repetition, patience, and the quiet understanding that beautiful things often emerge slowly. Across northern China, excavated Longshan sites reveal a growing presence of ceremonial objects made from jade, bone, and finely crafted pottery. Some artifacts appear inside elite graves, suggesting that certain individuals begin holding positions of authority within these communities. Yet power during this era still feels restrained, and deeply tied to ritual life rather than dramatic conquest or endless displays of military strength. The leaders of these settlements likely oversee agricultural planning, seasonal ceremonies, and communal labor projects rather than relying primarily on force. Archaeological evidence suggests cooperation remains essential for survival across the fertile yet unpredictable river plains. In many ways, authority resembles the quiet guidance of a respected village elder who somehow remembers every family, tool, pathway, and local concern. You step into the cool evening air where small fires glow softly near communal gathering spaces. Villagers sit together repairing fishing nets, polishing pottery, and sharing simple meals beneath the stars. The atmosphere feels calm and steady, although social organization gradually becomes more complex. Daily life still follows the familiar rhythms of seasons, harvests, and the quiet care of community relationships. At several Longshan sites, archaeologists uncover ceramic drums, bone ornaments, and delicate drinking vessels placed carefully inside homes and burial chambers. These objects reflect not only craftsmanship but also shared traditions connecting communities across generations. A polished bone pendant or a carved cup may carry symbolic meaning, yet it also serves as part of ordinary life, handled daily beneath the same changing sky. You can almost hear the soft beat of clay drums echoing gently through the evening air during communal rituals held after harvest seasons. Firelight flickers across faces while smoke rises slowly toward the stars overhead. The ceremonies likely honor ancestors, seasonal cycles, or natural forces shaping village life. Nothing appears loud or theatrical. Instead, these gatherings seem intimate, steady, and deeply woven into the emotional rhythm of the community. Inside storage buildings, baskets filled with millet rest beside pottery jars sealed carefully against moisture, Agricultural stability continues supporting population growth throughout the region, allowing settlements to expand gradually over time. The organization required to maintain food supplies, irrigation systems, and labor projects hints at increasingly sophisticated social coordination emerging quietly across the Longshan world. You notice how every crafted object carries traces of human touch. A polished jade blade reflects years of practice. A woven mat preserves the memory of patient fingers crossing reeds together. Even the walls themselves contain visible layers pressed carefully into place by communal labor. Ancient societies often survive not through sudden brilliance, but through thousands of ordinary tasks repeated with care over generations. At the Taosi site in present-day Shanxi province, archaeologists later discover evidence suggesting some Longshan communities may include ceremonial platforms and structured public spaces. These findings imply that rituals and collective gatherings become increasingly important as settlements grow larger and more interconnected. Yet the atmosphere still feels balanced, as though authority flows through social harmony rather than rigid control. The surrounding plains remain fertile beneath seasonal rains, though subtle environmental pressures slowly begin shaping future changes across the region. For now, however, the villages continue functioning with remarkable stability. Farmers plant millet beside riverbanks, craftsmen polish jade beneath shelter roofs, and children chase one another through dusty courtyards, while adults pretend not to notice, until someone inevitably trips over a storage basket. You walk beside a narrow water channel, reflecting faint starlight across its quiet surface. Reeds sway gently in the evening breeze, while frogs call from hidden pools near cultivated fields. The landscape feels calm and protective, as though the earth itself wishes to preserve the delicate balance between labor, ritual, community, and nature for a little while longer. Many jade artifacts created during the Longshan period display remarkable simplicity. Their smooth curves and balanced proportions emphasize refinement rather than elaborate decoration. This quiet elegance reflects the values of the society itself, where beauty often emerges through patience, restraint, and skilled craftsmanship. The objects feel closely connected to harmony rather than personal display or material wealth. Inside a nearby home, a family gathers around the fading warmth of an evening fire. An elderly artisan demonstrates polishing techniques to a younger apprentice while shadows move softly across the earthen walls. Outside, cool wind drifts through narrow pathways beneath the stars. Such ordinary moments rarely enter written history, yet they quietly support civilization across generations. Archaeologists examining Longshan burial sites discover growing differences in grave goods among individuals, suggesting social hierarchy gradually becomes more visible. Some burials contain jade ornaments, fine pottery, or ceremonial objects, while others remain simpler. Even so, the transition appears slow and measured, without towering palaces or dramatic displays of authority dominating the landscape during this period. As night deepens, fires across the settlement fade into glowing embers, while workshops fall silent behind earth walls. Insects continue their steady song through the fields, and polished jade rests quietly beside sleeping families. Beneath this peaceful surface, subtle changes already begin moving through the world. Like faint ripples crossing still water, history slowly prepares to change direction. The wind moves differently now across the northern plains beside the Yellow River. You feel it brushing through taller grasses that no longer appear as green or thick as they once did in earlier generations. The climate of northern China begins changing slowly near the end of the Longshan period, and the shift arrives quietly, almost politely, without dramatic announcements or thunderous warnings echoing across the land. Modern geological studies suggest that periods of drought gradually become longer and more frequent during the late Neolithic era. Sediment records, ancient pollen samples, and lakebed evidence all point toward environmental stress spreading across parts of northern China. The rivers still flow, but the rhythms of rain and flooding begin, changing enough for farming communities to notice with growing concern. Beneath their otherwise calm routines, you walk beside a narrow irrigation channel where the water level sits slightly lower than expected for this season. Farmers kneel carefully beside millet fields, examining dry soil with thoughtful expressions shaped by experience rather than panic. Life continues as always, but subtle uncertainty settles into daily conversation, like dust drifting quietly through sunlight inside an old house. The villages remain active and organized despite these environmental pressures. Storage pits become more carefully maintained. Wells are dug deeper in some regions, and communities begin adjusting planting schedules to match shifting rainfall patterns. Human adaptation unfolds gradually here, not through sudden breakthroughs, but through countless practical decisions made by ordinary people, trying to preserve stability for their families and neighbors. Notice how the rammed earth walls surrounding many settlements appear taller and thicker than before. Archaeologists studying late Longshan sites observe increasing investment in defensive architecture during this period. Yet these walls are not always evidence of constant warfare. Often, they simply reflect the practical reality that growing populations and limited resources require stronger organization, clearer boundaries, and more coordinated protection of stored grain and water supplies. In the fading light of evening, the walls seem almost natural beside the plains, rising from the earth like extensions of the soil itself. Workers carry baskets of packed clay, while others reinforce outer layers using wooden frames and compacted sediment. The process requires patience and cooperation across entire communities. Nobody rushes. Construction unfolds slowly, much like the gradual environmental changes quietly reshaping the world around them. Beyond the settlements, migration patterns begin shifting across the Yellow River Basin. Some communities expand outward in search of more reliable farmland, water access, or grazing territory. Modern researchers believe population growth places additional pressure on resources during this era, encouraging movement into neighboring regions and increasing contact between different cultural groups. Throughout northern China, you follow a narrow trail leading toward distant villages connected through trade, marriage, and shared agricultural knowledge. Along these paths travel pottery styles, jade working techniques, farming practices, and stories carried softly from settlement to settlement. Cultural exchange spreads naturally across the landscape, flowing like water between riverbanks without needing formal roads or written maps to guide its movement. At night, fires flicker along the horizon where scattered communities rest beneath the stars. The atmosphere remains strangely peaceful despite the gradual pressures building beneath the surface of society. A farmer repairs a cracked storage jar beside his doorway, while another family quietly measures grain reserves for the coming winter. Somewhere nearby, someone definitely insists the weather was much better back in the old days, proving historical. Nostalgia may be humanity's oldest. Hobby archaeologists examining the Taosi site later uncover evidence of increasing social complexity and possible regional competition during the late Longshan era. Some settlements expand into larger, more organized centers, while others gradually weaken or fade away. Even so, these changes unfold patiently across many generations, resembling a slow shift in a river's course rather than sudden collapse or dramatic conquest. You pause beside a drying riverbank where reeds rustle softly beneath cool evening wind. The Yellow River continues carrying enormous loads of sediment across the plains, shaping channels that shift unpredictably over time. Entire communities depend on understanding these waters closely because a single flood season can reshape farmland, erase footpaths, or deposit fertile soil across new regions far from previous settlement boundaries. Inside village workshops, pottery production continues despite environmental uncertainty. Craftsmen shape elegant black ceramics beneath flickering kiln light, while families maintain ordinary routines around them. Human life rarely pauses completely during periods of change. Even as history quietly alters direction, people still prepare meals, repair roofs, tend animals, and argue gently about whose turn it is to fetch water before nightfall. The dry winds crossing northern China now carry more dust across open fields during certain seasons. Trees grow thinner in some regions, while grasslands slowly retreat beside heavily used farmland. None of these changes appear dramatic by themselves, yet together they create a quiet awareness that the landscape is shifting in subtle but increasingly meaningful ways across the plains. You begin understanding how civilizations rarely change because of one sudden event. Instead, many small pressures accumulate gradually through generations until communities adapt, reorganize, or relocate. Climate, population growth, resource availability, and geography work together beneath daily life, influencing human history with the same patience and persistence shown by slow-moving rivers crossing broad valleys. At several Longshan sites, archaeologists discovered damaged walls, burned structures, and scattered weapons suggesting occasional conflict. Yet these findings remain relatively limited compared to later periods shaped by organized warfare. The era still feels defined more by adaptation than destruction, as communities respond to environmental challenges with resilience, cooperation, and practical adjustments rather than constant violence or instability. You walk beside tall earth walls surrounding a settlement preparing for another uncertain season. Beyond the gates, cultivated fields stretch beneath pale moonlight while cool wind moves steadily through dry grass. The people living here cannot fully predict what lies ahead, yet they continue farming, building, crafting, and organizing daily life with quiet determination beneath the changing sky far across the plains. Scattered communities begin following new paths through the Yellow River Basin. Traditions travel with them as pottery styles evolve, settlement patterns shift, and social structures slowly reorganize. History changes direction so gently that nobody notices the exact moment transformation begins. Beneath the stars, Longshan approaches a turning point while still moving forward with calm and steady rhythm. The night sky stretches endlessly above the settlement of Taosi, deep and silent except for the faint rustling of wind moving through dry grass beyond the earth walls. You stand beside one of the largest Longshan sites ever discovered, a place that once feels organized, ceremonial, and quietly ambitious. Yet beneath the calm surface of village life, subtle changes now begin moving through the community like slow shadows crossing water. Taosi lies within present-day Shaanxi province, and modern archaeologists consider it one of the most important late Longshan sites in northern China. Excavations reveal large rammed earth structures, carefully planned districts, and what may be one of the earliest known astronomical observatories in East Asia. Even today, the discoveries at Taosi continue fascinating researchers who spend years carefully studying the ancient soil layer by layer. You walk toward a raised ceremonial area where rows of upright posts and carefully aligned openings face the eastern horizon. Archaeologists believe this structure may allow ancient observers to track the sunrise during important seasonal moments. At certain times of year, sunlight passes precisely through narrow gaps, marking changes connected to agriculture, ritual timing, and the steady movement of the heavens above the plains. The observatory feels surprisingly peaceful in the pale glow before dawn. You can imagine quiet figures standing here thousands of years ago, watching the horizon brighten while cool morning air drifts across the settlement. There are no clocks, calendars, or glowing screens demanding attention every few seconds. Only the sky itself provides guidance, which honestly sounds both beautiful and slightly stressful during cloudy weather. The people of Taosi appear deeply connected to cycles of nature and seasonal rhythm. Successful harvests depend on careful timing, and astronomical observation may help communities organize planting schedules or ritual gatherings. The movement of stars and sunlight becomes part of daily survival, blending practical knowledge with spiritual meaning in ways that later civilizations continue refining for centuries. Yet beneath this organized surface, archaeologists begin noticing signs of growing social inequality within Taosi society. Some graves contain rich collections of jade, pottery, crocodile skin drums, and ceremonial objects, while others remain simple and modest. These differences suggest that certain individuals or families gradually gain greater influence, authority, and access to valuable resources as the settlement grows more complex. You pass through residential districts where larger structures stand apart from smaller homes clustered nearby. The contrast remains subtle compared to later royal palaces, but the pattern feels unmistakable. Some residents possess more space, more crafted goods, and perhaps greater control over labor or ritual activities within the community. Human societies often shift this way slowly, almost invisibly at first, like water quietly deepening along a riverbank. Archaeological evidence also suggests periods of tension may emerge within Taosi during its later phases. Excavators discover damaged walls, burned structures, and unusual burial patterns, hinting at social disruption or conflict. Yet these changes unfold gradually rather than explosively. The atmosphere feels less like sudden collapse and more like an aging ecosystem adjusting uneasily to growing internal pressures over many generations. You walk along a broad dirt road that once connects different sections of the settlement. In earlier centuries, these pathways likely remained busy with farmers, potters, traders, and laborers carrying grain or clay between workshops and communal areas. Now, however, parts of the road feel quieter. Certain buildings stand empty, and patches of untended earth appear where activity once fills the space. With steady movement, the evening wind drifts softly through abandoned courtyards where weeds push carefully between packed earth foundations. A cracked pottery vessel rests near one doorway, left behind so long ago that even the memory of its owner has disappeared into silence. Somewhere nearby, an exhausted worker probably once promised to repair that broken pot tomorrow. accidentally inventing procrastination thousands of years before modern office culture. Inside the remaining occupied homes, life still continues with calm persistence. Families prepare evening meals beside hearth fires, while craftsmen shape pottery beneath dim light. Children chase one another along narrow paths, while elders quietly discuss weather patterns and crop conditions. Civilizations rarely recognize their own turning points while living through them. Most people simply continue ordinary routines beneath slowly changing circumstances. At Taosi, archaeologists uncover evidence of specialized workshops and organized labor systems supporting increasingly large communal projects. Some researchers suggest the settlement may function as an early regional center with political or ceremonial significance. Yet maintaining such complexity likely requires growing coordination, resource management, and social hierarchy, all of which place additional strain on communities already facing environmental pressures across northern China. You notice subtle changes across the landscape compared to earlier centuries. Dry winds cross the plains more often, and some farmland appears less productive than before. Climate fluctuations gradually affect water supplies and agricultural stability throughout the region. These shifts do not immediately threaten Taosi, but they require constant adaptation from the people living within its earth walls. Above the settlement, the stars remain clear and steady despite the uncertainty slowly developing below. Ancient observers continue tracking celestial movements through carefully aligned structures, while seasonal rituals likely continue beside communal fires. Familiar traditions provide continuity during changing times, offering comfort and stability whenever the world begins shifting quietly beneath everyday life. Some archaeologists suggest Taosi eventually experiences political fragmentation or internal tensions that contribute to population decline. Others believe environmental pressures play a larger role in weakening the settlement over time. The reality may involve many interconnected causes unfolding together across generations. History rarely follows a simple path, despite how neatly modern documentaries occasionally try to organize complex stories. You walk through districts where larger buildings now stand partly empty beneath moonlit skies. Wooden beams creak softly in the wind, while dust settles across storage rooms once filled with grain and tools. The silence feels calm rather than sorrowful. Like forests and riverbanks, human settlements sometimes expand, contract, and transform according to forces larger than individual lives. Beyond Taosi, other Longshan communities also begin changing during this period. Some settlements decline while others migrate, reorganize, or blend into emerging cultures throughout the Yellow River Basin. Traditions continue moving through people even as cities fade. Pottery techniques, ritual customs, and agricultural knowledge survive quietly across generations. Beneath the stars, a new chapter begins almost too slowly for anyone to notice. The rivers continue flowing through northern China long after individual settlements begin to fade into silence. You walk beside the broad waters of the Yellow River as small Longshan communities gradually weaken, reorganize, or move elsewhere across the plains. Nothing disappears all at once. Families gather tools, carry pottery, guide animals along dusty paths, and quietly follow new routes toward lands where life may continue more steadily. The migrations happen slowly across generations rather than within a single dramatic moment. Some villages shrink after difficult harvest seasons, while others blend into neighboring communities already forming farther downstream. Archaeologists studying settlement patterns across late Neolithic China observe these gradual movements through shifting pottery styles, changing burial customs, and newly occupied regions beside tributaries feeding into the great northern rivers. You travel along narrow footpaths, winding beside reed-covered wetlands and shallow crossing points where traders and farming families meet. The atmosphere remains calm despite the changes unfolding everywhere around the landscape. Human beings adapt quietly most of the time. Even while societies transform, someone still pauses to cook grain beside the fire or complain gently that the journey feels longer than expected. The old Longshan traditions do not vanish when settlements decline. Instead, they travel through memory, craftsmanship, and ordinary routines carried by the people themselves. Potters continue shaping thin black ceramics in newer communities. Builders still compact earth walls using techniques refined over centuries. Farmers plant millet beside familiar riverbanks while elders teach younger generations. The same seasonal knowledge preserved across countless harvest cycles. Historians and archaeologists believe many cultural elements from the Longshan world continue influencing the emerging Erlitou civilization that appears later in the Yellow River Basin. Erlitou, often associated by some scholars with the legendary Xia dynasty, develops around 1900 BCE and reveals increasing social organization, bronze production, and urban planning. Yet beneath these newer structures, traces of older Longshan traditions remain quietly visible. You stand near a riverside settlement where workers shape rammed earth foundations beneath the warm glow of late afternoon sunlight. The construction methods feel familiar because knowledge rarely disappears completely between generations. Instead, techniques evolve gradually as people adapt old skills to new environments. Like water finding fresh channels after seasonal floods, culture changes direction without entirely abandoning its original source. The walls rising around these newer communities appear stronger and more carefully organized than earlier village boundaries. Larger populations now require expanded storage systems, coordinated labor, and increasingly formal leadership structures. Yet even as societies become more complex, the daily rhythm of ordinary life remains surprisingly recognizable. Someone still wakes before sunrise to prepare food, while another quietly repairs cracked pottery beside the doorway. Archaeological discoveries from early two sites reveal evidence of bronze casting workshops, ceremonial spaces, and organized road systems. Bronze technology gradually expands during this period, marking an important transition in early Chinese civilization. However, the movement toward metallurgy does not erase older traditions overnight. Stone tools, pottery crafts, and agricultural routines continue alongside newer innovations for many generations. You notice how rivers shape not only the geography of northern China, but also the movement of ideas themselves. Along these waterways travel seeds, tools, rituals, and architectural knowledge connecting distant communities across enormous landscapes. The Yellow River becomes less a dividing line and more a living corridor through which culture drifts slowly across centuries like mist spreading over calm water before dawn. At dusk, fishermen guide narrow boats through shallow channels while smoke rises from newly established villages along the riverbanks. Children play beside storage pits lined carefully against moisture, and elders discuss weather patterns beneath woven shelters. Somewhere nearby, a traveler probably insists they know a much shorter route through the wetlands before immediately getting lost, preserving another timeless human tradition. The blending of populations during this period helps create the diverse cultural foundations of later Chinese civilization. Anthropologists studying burial practices, pottery styles, and regional artifacts suggest that communities across northern China increasingly exchange ideas, technologies, and marriage connections through generations of interaction. Cultural identity remains flexible and interconnected, shaped by continual contact, adaptation, and shared experiences. Across different regions, you walk through a busy workshop where artisans shape molds for early bronze objects, while nearby potters continue, producing familiar black ceramics inherited from Longshan traditions. The coexistence feels natural rather than contradictory. Human societies rarely abandon old methods entirely when new technologies appear. Instead, ancient and emerging practices overlap gently, creating layered cultures shaped by both memory and innovation. As evening settles across the plains, the great earth walls surrounding ancient settlements catch the final golden light of sunset. Their construction reflects generations of knowledge passed carefully from builders to apprentices through changing communities. More than defensive structures, these walls symbolize continuity connecting different eras that historians later separate into distinct cultures and dynasties. The Longshan world gradually becomes less a single, clearly defined culture and more a network of influences spreading through migration, exchange, and adaptation across the Yellow River Basin. Pottery styles evolve, ritual traditions take on regional variations, and settlement designs grow increasingly sophisticated. Yet beneath these changes, older customs continue quietly enduring, carried forward through everyday routines, shared knowledge, and generations of life lived beside the rivers. You begin to understand that history rarely offers clean endings. Civilizations do not vanish overnight, while new societies suddenly appear fully formed the next morning. Instead, change unfolds gradually through movement, blending, and reorganization. Longshan traditions continue living within later communities, much like ancient river channels, remaining hidden beneath newer layers of sediment across broad floodplains. At several archaeological sites associated with early Bronze Age China, researchers discover continued use of rammed earth construction techniques first perfected during the Longshan era. Patterns of village organization, ceremonial traditions, and agricultural practices also demonstrate remarkable continuity across generations. Early Chinese civilization emerges not through sudden replacement or abrupt change, but through centuries of gradual adaptation. that connect ancient communities to the states and dynasties that later flourish across the region. The wind moves softly through tall grass beside the yellow river as darkness gathers across the plains. Firelight flickers within newer settlements built near abandoned villages, while travelers follow waterways toward unfamiliar lands. Standing beneath the deepening night sky, you sense that nothing truly disappears. Traditions simply change form, flowing onward through generations like mist lingering above the river before dawn. Morning arrives softly across the Yellow River Basin, where pale light spreads over mist-covered fields and quiet settlements beside the water. You stand at the edge of a changing world as the Bronze Age slowly begins to emerge across northern China. Yet even as new technologies appear, the memory of the Longshan culture continues resting gently within the rhythms of village life, ritual practice, and ancient patterns of settlement. The transition into the Bronze Age does not feel sudden or dramatic from the perspective of ordinary people. Farmers still wake before sunrise to tend millet fields beside the riverbanks. Potters continue shaping vessels with practiced hands beneath workshop shelters. Children still chase each other through dusty courtyards while elders quietly discuss rainfall and harvest conditions as though the world itself has barely changed at all. Archaeologists studying the early Urlitu culture notice many signs of continuity linking these newer societies to the older Longshan traditions. Settlement planning, rammed earth construction techniques, and ceramic craftsmanship all reveal strong cultural inheritance across generations. History here resembles a slow current carrying familiar patterns forward rather than a violent break. Between entirely separate civilizations, you walk through a growing settlement where workers prepare clay molds beside an early bronze workshop. Nearby, older rammed earth walls remain firm after decades of rain and changing seasons. The contrast between old and new feels harmonious rather than conflicting. Bronze tools and ceremonial objects appear beside ancient construction methods, blending innovation with traditions carried forward through generations. Inside the workshop, heat rises from clay furnaces glowing softly beneath the morning haze. Craftsmen pour molten bronze into prepared molds, while assistants tend charcoal fires with steady focus. The metal casts golden reflections across nearby walls before fading into shadow. Bronze technology gradually transforms life, improving tools, strengthening production, and supporting increasingly complex communities throughout the Yellow River region. Stronger tools improve farming efficiency, ceremonial vessels become more elaborate, and regional leaders gain new symbols of authority through metalworking. Yet these changes unfold over long periods of time rather than overnight. Stone tools, pottery traditions, and older agricultural practices continue existing beside bronze. Innovations for many generations. You notice how the village itself remains organized around familiar seasonal rhythms despite these technological advances. Fishing nets dry beside the river while grain storage pits are sealed carefully before incoming rains. Women repair woven baskets beneath shaded roofs, and children gather water from shallow wells lined with compacted earth. Daily life still moves according to weather, soil, and river currents, rather than political ambition alone. Archaeological evidence suggests that many ritual traditions established during the Longshan era continue influencing the societies. Associated with early Xia and Shang culture, ceremonial spaces remain important, ancestral practices persist, and carefully arranged burial customs still reflect beliefs connecting the living with those who came before them. Even as dynastic legends begin forming, older spiritual patterns quietly endure. Beneath the surface, you pass through a ceremonial courtyard, where bronze vessels rest beside polished pottery and carved jade, ornaments inherited from earlier generations. The blending feels natural rather than contradictory. Human cultures rarely erase their past completely. Instead, older customs continue flowing beneath newer systems like hidden river channels, moving silently beneath fresh layers of floodplain soil. The Urlitu culture, which flourishes around 1900 to 1500 BCE, introduces increasingly sophisticated urban organization into the Yellow River Basin. Archaeologists uncover palace foundations, road systems, drainage structures, and specialized workshops suggesting coordinated governance and large-scale labor projects. Yet even these growing centers remain closely tied to agricultural life and seasonal cycles surrounding the rivers and fertile plains. At sunset, smoke rises slowly from bronze foundries while nearby farmers guide animals back toward village enclosures. The contrast between industrial heat and peaceful countryside creates a strangely balanced atmosphere. Civilization expands carefully here, not through frantic acceleration, but through steady accumulation of knowledge. passed quietly from one generation into the next. You stop beside a craftsman carefully polishing the surface of a newly cast bronze vessel beneath the fading light of evening. The metal gleams softly against nearby rammed earth walls, reflecting both innovation and memory. Bronze may represent a new age, yet the hands shaping it belong to descendants of people who once perfected Longshan pottery. Generations earlier, some historians associate the Erlitou culture with the legendary Shi dynasty described in later Chinese texts. Although scholarly debate continues today, archaeological evidence nevertheless reveals growing social complexity during this period. Larger settlements, specialized labor, organized production, and expanding networks of authority all suggest the gradual emergence of early state-level societies within the Yellow River region. You continue along narrow roads linking workshops, storage compounds, and residential districts throughout the settlement. These pathways appear more structured than those of earlier Longshan villages, yet daily life retains a familiar rhythm. Workers transport clay, grain, charcoal, and tools while traders exchange goods beneath open skies filled with drifting smoke and migrating birds overhead. Near the riverbank, fishermen untangle nets while children skip stones across shallow water reflecting the colors of dusk. The river itself remains remarkably unchanged despite centuries passing along its shores. It continues flooding fertile fields, depositing fresh sediment, shifting channels, and quietly shaping human settlement patterns with the same patient authority known since the earliest villages appeared nearby. Archaeologists studying early Shang sites later uncover advanced bronze casting methods capable of producing ceremonial vessels with remarkable complexity and artistic refinement. Yet traces of Longshan influence remain visible in settlement planning, ritual traditions, and agricultural systems supporting these growing centers of power. Civilizations evolve gradually, carrying fragments of older worlds forward into each new chapter of history. As darkness settles across the plains, the glow of bronze furnaces flickers softly beside ancient rammed earth walls, weathered by countless seasons of rain and wind. Nearby, a farmer carefully stores millet for winter, while craftsmen prepare molds for another casting at dawn. Political transformations may be unfolding across the region, yet ordinary life continues steadily beside the river as always. You stand quietly beside the flowing yellow river, beneath a sky slowly filling with stars. The Bronze Age has begun. New centers of authority are rising, and unfamiliar dynasties wait beyond the horizon of history. Yet beneath these changes, the older heartbeat of Longshan survives within the land itself through craft, memory, ritual, and endlessly moving water. The northern hills of China remain still beneath the passing centuries, watching human settlements appear and disappear across the valleys below, like leaves drifting quietly along slow-moving water. You stand among these ancient landscapes where wind brushes gently through tall grasses growing between weathered stones. Dynasties rise, villages expand, and rivers change course. Yet the mountains continue observing everything with calm and patient silence. Morning mist curls softly along the lower slopes, while distant streams reflect pale sunlight beneath a gray-blue sky. The land feels older than memory itself, even before the Longshan culture begins shaping pottery beside the Yellow River. These hills already stand here through countless seasons of rain, frost, and drifting clouds moving slowly across northern China. Archaeologists searching the ancient plains often uncover Longshan artifacts buried deep beneath layers of packed earth and sediment. Black pottery fragments, polished jade ornaments, and stone tools emerge carefully from the soil after resting silently for thousands of years. Many objects appear stained with dark brown tones created by minerals and moisture, as though time itself has gently wrapped them in a quiet blanket of dust and stillness. You kneel beside an excavation trench where researchers brush soil carefully from the edge of a pottery vessel hidden underground for centuries beyond counting. The work unfolds slowly and patiently because one careless movement might damage an object that has survived since before the earliest Chinese dynasties. Archaeology often resembles a very delicate treasure hunt designed specifically for people who genuinely enjoy carrying tiny brushes everywhere they go. The discoveries scattered across northern China reveal how deeply interconnected ancient communities become over time. Anthropologists studying burial customs, pottery designs, and settlement patterns increasingly believe that early Chinese civilization forms through the gradual blending of many regional cultures rather than from one isolated source alone. The Longshan people contribute important traditions, but they exist within a larger tapestry woven across centuries of migration and exchange. You walk along an old river terrace overlooking fertile plains stretching toward the horizon beneath drifting clouds. Somewhere below, settlements once rise beside streams and farmland before eventually fading back into the earth. Yet the people themselves do not simply vanish. Families move, intermarry, share techniques, and carry stories into neighboring communities, slowly shaping the cultural foundations of future Chinese civilization. The mountains seem almost indifferent to these human movements, though not in a cruel way. Their patience simply exists on a different scale of time. 100 years passes like a single season against the stone cliffs and weathered ridges surrounding the valleys. Even the most powerful rulers of later dynasties would eventually become brief memories compared to the enduring silence of the northern hills. You pause beside scattered pine trees clinging stubbornly to rocky ground above the plains. Cool wind moves through their branches with a soft whispering sound that feels older than language itself. Nearby, small farming communities continue tending fields beside rivers exactly as generations before them once do. Human life changes constantly, yet many ordinary routines remain comfortingly familiar across enormous stretches of history. At several archaeological sites connected to Longshan culture, researchers discover evidence of regional diversity among settlements. Pottery styles differ slightly between communities. Burial traditions shift according to local customs. Building methods adapt to surrounding geography and climate. These variations suggest ancient, northern China contains many interconnected identities, rather than one uniform civilization. Spreading neatly across the landscape, you imagine traders traveling slowly between villages carrying grain, jade, pottery, and woven cloth along narrow dirt paths beneath open skies. With them, travel songs, farming knowledge, marriage traditions, and religious beliefs. Cultural exchange often happens quietly through ordinary contact rather than dramatic historical events. Most civilizations grow through countless small conversations beside fires, marketplaces, and river crossings instead of grand speeches delivered from marble balconies. Far below the hills, rivers continue depositing fertile sediment across the plains, while older settlement ruins disappear gradually beneath new layers of earth. Floods reshape the land repeatedly over centuries, burying traces of ancient communities beneath thick soil deposits. This is why so many Longshan artifacts remain preserved underground, sleeping quietly beneath farmland and grasslands until modern excavation finally returns them to daylight. The deeper you move into these landscapes, the smaller human conflict begins to feel against the immense scale of nature itself. Political power shifts from one center to another. Regional leaders rise, organize labor, and construct ceremonial spaces before eventually fading into obscurity. Yet the rivers still flow toward the sea, and the mountains remain standing beneath changing skies without needing monuments or written records to preserve their presence. You stop beside a shallow stream flowing over smooth stones shaped by centuries of moving water. Tiny insects drift above the surface while reeds sway gently along the banks. The simplicity of the scene feels deeply calming. In the modern world, schedules race forward endlessly. Yet this ancient landscape quietly reminds you that almost everything eventually slows again. Anthropologists, studying ancient DNA and migration patterns increasingly, suggest that early Chinese civilization develops through long periods of interaction. Among many communities, agricultural villages, river settlements, and regional cultures gradually exchange ideas, technologies, and traditions across generations. Together, these connections create a layered cultural foundation, supporting the later rise of powerful dynasties. Throughout northern China, you walk beside weathered hills where forgotten villages once overlooked fertile valleys stretching into the distance. The homes have vanished, their walls long absorbed into the surrounding earth. Yet traces remain beneath the soil through pottery fragments, buried foundations, charred grain, and other quiet remnants. History often survives through small details rather than dramatic events. As evening approaches, long shadows stretch across the plains while distant mountains fade into soft blue-gray silhouettes beneath the setting sun. The landscape feels vast, peaceful, and untouched by urgency. Human ambition, warfare, and political authority seem temporary here, like ripples spreading briefly across a deep lake before, dissolving completely into stillness and silence. Night settles gently across mountains and valleys, while cool wind drifts through grasses beside ancient riverbanks. You begin to understand that civilizations resemble passing seasons more than permanent structures. Communities form, adapt, blend, and transform into something new. The Longshan culture becomes one current within a larger flow, while the land quietly preserves memories of generations beneath the endless northern sky. Beneath the thick layers of sediment carried for centuries by the Yellow River, the traces of the Longshan world sleep quietly in darkness. You stand above fields that appear ordinary at first glance, covered with grasses moving softly beneath the wind. Yet far below the surface rest broken pottery, buried walls, forgotten pathways, and the silent remains of communities untouched for thousands of years. The earth itself becomes a kind of memory. Floods deposit fresh silt year after year, covering abandoned settlements beneath deep blankets of soil. Entire villages disappear this way, not through dramatic destruction, but through the patient movement of rivers and seasons. Time settles gently over everything here, preserving the past inside the land like pages folded carefully inside an ancient book. For centuries, the Longshan culture remains unknown. Farmers plow fields above buried settlements without realizing delicate pottery rests beneath their feet. Children run across old village foundations hidden beneath crops and grasses. The ancient communities continue sleeping silently underground while dynasties rise and fall above them, each generation unaware of the older world resting quietly below. Then, in 1928, excavations at Chengxiai in Shandong province begin revealing one of the first major windows into the Longshan civilization. Archaeologists uncover fragments of remarkably thin black pottery, unlike anything previously known from ancient China. These discoveries reshape modern understanding of Chinese prehistory and open a new chapter in the study of early civilization along the Yellow River Basin. You walk slowly beside an excavation trench illuminated by pale morning sunlight. Workers kneel carefully beside the exposed earth, using brushes and small tools to uncover objects hidden beneath layers of compacted soil. The atmosphere feels almost ceremonial in its quiet concentration. Nobody rushes because every fragment matters, and every movement risks disturbing something that has waited silently for 4,000 years. The black pottery discovered at Chengxiai quickly becomes famous among archaeologists because of its extraordinary craftsmanship. Some vessels possess walls so thin they are compared to eggshells, delicate enough to appear almost impossible for such an ancient society to create. Even under modern museum lighting, the surfaces still carry a soft, polished glow, reflecting the remarkable skill of Longshan artisans. You pause beside a restored ceramic cup displayed carefully beneath glass. The object feels strangely alive despite its age. Its smooth curves fit naturally within the human hand, just as they once did thousands of years earlier beside a firelit Longshan home. Looking at it closely, you begin realizing that ancient people rarely feel truly distant once their ordinary belongings return quietly into view. The archaeologists working at Chengxiai during the early 20th century faced difficult conditions compared to modern excavation teams. Tools remain simple, documentation methods are still developing, and many discoveries require careful interpretation without the advanced technology available today. Yet their work transforms the understanding of Chinese archaeology, proving sophisticated Neolithic cultures flourish long before the earliest dynasties recorded in historical texts. You continue through the excavation site, where outlines of ancient foundations emerge gradually from the soil. Packed earth walls, storage pits, pottery kilns, and burial areas slowly reveal the structure of long-forgotten communities. The process resembles waking a sleeping landscape piece by piece, allowing voices from the distant past to return softly into human awareness after centuries of silence. As archaeological research expands across northern China, additional Longshan sites appear in provinces including Henan, Shaanxi, and Shanxi. Each discovery adds new details about settlement organization, craftsmanship, agriculture, and ritual life. Together, these sites reveal a broad and interconnected cultural network shaping early Chinese civilization beside the river systems of the north. You notice how carefully archaeologists preserve even the smallest fragments uncovered from the earth. A broken pottery rim, a charred grain sample, or a worn stone tool may contain valuable information about daily life thousands of years ago. Ancient history often survives through details so ordinary that their original owners likely never imagined anyone would someday study them beneath bright laboratory lights and very serious facial expressions. The excavation lamps cast warm circles of light across dark soil during evening work sessions at the site. Beneath this glow, black pottery fragments seem almost untouched by time itself. Their polished surfaces reflect softly against the surrounding earth, creating the strange illusion that the ancient Longshan craftsmen have only recently stepped away from their workshops for a brief moment beside the river. You begin sensing that archaeology changes far more than knowledge alone. It quietly transforms humanity's relationship with time itself. The past no longer feels like a distant line disappearing behind the present. Instead, it exists in layers beneath everyday life, resting silently under roads, fields, and modern cities where forgotten worlds remain preserved. Each discovery reveals that ancient lives are not truly gone, only waiting patiently beneath the surface to be remembered once again. Researchers studying Longshan culture throughout the 20th century gradually uncover evidence of organized agriculture, social hierarchy, ritual traditions, advanced craftsmanship, and complex settlements. These discoveries challenge older assumptions that civilization appears suddenly alongside written dynasties. Instead, the roots of Chinese civilization seem deeper, broader, and more gradual than many historians once fully appreciated. You walk slowly across open ground above Chengxiai while evening mist gathers over the distant plains. Beneath your feet remain traces of ancient hearths where meals were prepared and stories shared long before recorded history begins. The silence of the landscape feels comforting rather than empty, as though the earth quietly remembers everything. As this journey continues, time begins losing its sharp boundaries. Ancient villages revealed through archaeology do not feel entirely gone, nor does the modern world feel completely separate from them. Human lives continue repeating familiar patterns through farming, craftsmanship, storytelling, and adaptation to landscapes shaped by rivers, seasons, weather, and the steady passage of generations. At night, the excavation site falls silent beneath the stars, while tools rest beside uncovered walls, and pottery fragments sleep beneath protective coverings. Wind crosses the plains exactly as it did during the Longshan era, thousands of years ago. Standing beside the ancient soil, you sense time moving not in straight lines but in quiet circles, carrying memory gently forward. Moonlight settles softly across the collapsed earth walls of forgotten Longshan settlements, covering the ancient ruins with pale silver light beneath the endless northern sky. You walk slowly through fields where wild grass now grows thick over pathways once used daily by farmers, potters, and children carrying water from nearby streams. The villages themselves have long disappeared into silence, yet the land still holds their quiet shape beneath the soil. The walls that once protected homes and storage areas now resemble low hills rising gently from the earth. Wind moves through dry grass, growing between broken foundations, while insects hum steadily beneath the darkness. There are no voices here anymore, no footsteps along the roads, no smoke rising from hearth fires. Only the soft movement of night air remains drifting across the abandoned ground. You pause beside a shallow depression that may once have served as a communal courtyard or workshop area. Thousands of years ago, this place likely echoed with conversation, labor, and ritual gatherings beneath firelight. Now, moonlight alone fills the empty space while scattered stones rest quietly beneath layers of moss and dust like sleeping memories too old to fully awaken again. Geologists studying the Yellow River explain that its channels have shifted repeatedly throughout history, reshaping enormous regions of northern China over centuries. Floods alter landscapes, erase settlements, and deposit fresh sediment across plains where entire communities once stand. Some researchers even describe the river as one of the most unpredictable waterways in human history, which honestly feels like an exhausting personality trait for a river to maintain. You walk toward the distant outline of the floodplain where silver light reflects faintly across shallow water. Somewhere beneath those quiet fields may rest forgotten villages buried by centuries of shifting river channels and accumulated silt. The earth preserves some traces while erasing others completely. Human memory fades quickly, but geology remembers patiently through layers of soil, stone, and sediment deposited over unimaginable stretches of time. The farther you move through the ancient landscape, the more nature seems to reclaim every sign of human activity. Grass covers collapsed walls. Trees grow where homes once stand. Seasonal rains smooth rough edges from abandoned foundations until the ruins begin blending almost seamlessly into the surrounding terrain. Civilization itself slowly softens back into the earth from which it originally rises. At night, the abandoned Longshan settlements feel less like ruins and more like quiet pauses within a much larger natural rhythm. Crickets sing beside old irrigation channels now filled with reeds and wildflowers. Wind brushes gently through open fields where millet once grows beneath careful hands. The absence of human noise creates a strange feeling of calm, as though the land itself has finally settled into deep and uninterrupted rest. You stand beneath the stars, imagining the countless ordinary lives once unfolding here. Someone repairs pottery beside a doorway, while another family stores grain before winter arrives. Children chase each other through dusty courtyards, while elders discuss changing weather patterns beneath evening skies. History often remembers rulers and wars, yet most human existence quietly belongs to moments like these instead. Archaeologists studying Longshan sites frequently discover how incomplete the surviving record can be. Entire settlements may vanish without leaving more than faint soil discolorations or scattered pottery fragments beneath farmland. Time removes details patiently. Wooden structures decay, textiles disappear, voices fade completely. What remains are traces delicate enough that a single season of erosion can erase them forever from human understanding. The moon rises higher above the plains, while cool air drifts from the northern hills across the river valleys. The landscape feels deeply peaceful, despite the vast weight of forgotten history beneath it. Nature does not mourn civilizations. Rivers keep flowing, grass returns after drought, and birds nest in ruined walls without concern for the cultures once here. Scientists believe the Yellow River changes course many times over thousands of years, sometimes causing devastating floods capable of burying settlements or forcing entire populations to relocate. Yet, even these dramatic geological processes unfold slowly within the broader scale of natural history. Human societies experience them as crises, but the earth itself simply continues reshaping the plains according to ancient rhythms older than civilization. You kneel beside fragments of dark pottery partially revealed by recent rain near the edge of a forgotten settlement. The pieces remain remarkably smooth despite centuries beneath the soil, still carrying traces of careful craftsmanship. Long ago, an artisan shaped this vessel beside a glowing kiln, while insects hummed beyond the workshop. Now only quiet fragments rest beneath moonlight and gently swaying grass. Across northern China, countless archaeological sites remain hidden beneath fields, villages, and riverbanks. The Longshan world survives not as a single preserved city, but as a vast network of scattered memories woven across the landscape. Each buried wall and pottery fragment contributes quietly to a larger story of adaptation, continuity, and human resilience. You begin sensing how temporary all structures become when measured against rivers, mountains, and shifting climates. Earth walls eventually crumble, roads vanish beneath layers of sediment, and once thriving settlements slowly blend into the surrounding terrain. Yet this impermanence feels strangely comforting tonight, like watching footprints disappear gradually from wet sand beside a shoreline. The Longshan culture no longer survives as a visible civilization, yet traces of its influence continue flowing through later Chinese history. Pottery traditions evolve into new forms, settlement planning shapes future communities, and ritual practices adapt across generations. Nothing truly disappears. Instead, everything changes gradually, blending into the larger movement of human experience through time. You continue beneath the moonlight while tall grasses bend softly along forgotten pathways leading nowhere visible now. Beneath the earth rest collapsed workshops, buried storage pits, and silent courtyards untouched for thousands of years. The boundary between civilization and nature grows increasingly difficult to distinguish as both merge through endless cycles of growth, decay, and renewal. Far away, the Yellow River continues crossing the northern plains exactly as it always has. Its waters reflect the moon in shifting patterns, while cool wind drifts across the open land. As darkness deepens around the forgotten walls of Longshan, the ruins seem to dissolve gently into the landscape, becoming part of the vast and silent earth beneath the stars. After thousands of years, the great empires of ancient China drift quietly into the past, just as the earliest Longshan communities once do beside the Yellow River. You stand at the edge of the northern plains, where moonlight reflects faintly across calm water and soft mist settles over the sleeping earth. The immense story of civilization now feels distant and gentle, like an old memory slowly dissolving into the night air. The rulers who once command armies, build cities, and shape dynasties eventually fade into silence alongside the farmers, potters, and craftsmen who live long before them. Palaces collapse, walls sink beneath the soil, written records grow fragile with age. Yet the rivers continue moving steadily through the landscape without hurry, carrying sediment toward distant seas beneath changing skies that remain endlessly patient. Geological time moves far more slowly than human history can easily understand. Mountains rise and wear away over millions of years, while rivers gradually carve valleys across the plains. Against this enormous scale, even the longest dynasties become brief moments, lasting no more than a soft breath within the endless movement of the earth itself. Human ambition flickers gently before disappearing into deeper currents of time. You walk slowly beside the Yellow River, where cool night air drifts across reeds growing near the water's edge. The sound of flowing water feels softer now than earlier in the journey, almost distant enough to blend into silence. Far away, insects hum beneath the dark grasslands while pale mist spreads quietly over fields where ancient villages once stand beneath the stars. The Longshan culture becomes only one thread within a much larger tapestry stretching across Chinese history and beyond. Yet its influence never fully disappears. Techniques of craftsmanship, patterns of settlement, ritual traditions, and quiet habits of agricultural life continue traveling forward through countless generations. Human civilization changes shape repeatedly, but memory often survives hidden within ordinary routines repeated across centuries. You pause beside a smooth stone, warmed slightly by the memory of daylight still lingering within the earth. Nearby, river water moves steadily past sleeping reeds and shallow banks of dark sediment. Somewhere beneath those layers of soil rest forgotten pottery fragments shaped by hands that vanished from history thousands of years ago. The silence surrounding them no longer feels empty. Instead, it feels full of patient continuity. Throughout history, countless cities rise beside rivers, believing themselves permanent. Yet eventually, floods arrive, climates shift, trade routes change, and populations move elsewhere. Nature rarely destroys civilization through dramatic anger alone. More often, it simply continues moving according to rhythms too vast and slow for human plans to fully control. The earth reshapes itself gently while people come and go like passing seasons. You notice how calm the plains feel now without the noise of labor, ritual, or political struggle. No hammers strike earth walls. No ceremonial drums echo across village courtyards. The ancient roads remain empty beneath moonlight while tall grasses sway softly, where homes once shelter families from the evening cold. Even silence itself seems ancient here, resting comfortably across the abandoned landscape. The Yellow River has changed course many times across recorded and unrecorded history, carrying away entire settlements while creating fertile new ground elsewhere. Geologists map these shifts carefully through layers of sediment and ancient flood deposits scattered across northern China. Human beings often experience these transformations as endings, yet the river itself simply continues following gravity, weather, and time toward the sea. You sit quietly beside the water while distant stars reflect faintly on the dark surface of the river current. In the modern world, cities glow beneath electric light as people rush through crowded streets, checking messages, schedules, and time. Here, however, time slows almost completely, and only the steady, patient movement of water feels truly real within the silence of the night. The deeper this journey moves into stillness, the more history begins to resemble nature itself rather than a sequence of isolated events. Civilizations emerge, expand, adapt, and dissolve like forests growing, rivers flooding, and seasons changing. Nothing remains fixed forever, Yet nothing disappears completely. Every culture leaves traces that continue flowing quietly through future generations. You breathe slowly beneath the cool night sky while mist gathers across the plains surrounding the riverbanks. The stars appear distant and untouched by empires or human memory. Ancient astronomers at Taosi once studied these same constellations through carefully aligned structures, tracking seasons beneath skies that remain almost unchanged after 4,000 years of silent time. The earth itself feels like the true storyteller of this long journey. Soil preserves pottery fragments, rivers bury foundations beneath silt, and wind softens ruined walls into hills covered with grass. Nature carries history without monuments or written language, quietly holding everything that once lived, worked, and disappeared along the Yellow River basin. Far across the dark plains, water continues moving gently around unseen bends while insects sing beneath reeds. The sounds are so faint they barely disturb the silence. Every thought slows beside the river. Every worry feels smaller. And the immense movement of geological time carries everything forward with calm patience and no sense of urgency. You lie back within the stillness of the night and allow the ancient world to drift quietly around you. The forgotten villages of Longshan sleep beneath layers of earth and grass. The ruined walls rest beneath moonlight beside the endless river. The stars move slowly overhead, while cool mist settles across the plains with the softness of a fading dream. There is no final triumph waiting at the end of this story. No lasting empire rises forever above the earth. There is only movement, transformation, memory, and return. The Yellow River continues flowing through darkness exactly as it does thousands of years ago, carrying traces of countless human lives gently toward distant seas beyond the horizon of history itself. Now the night grows deeper still. The water becomes quieter. The wind slows among the grasses beside the ancient banks. Across the sleeping plains of northern China, history finally rests beneath layers of soil, mist, and silence, so complete that even time itself seems ready to close its eyes beside the eternal river. The script comes to a close. Thank you all for listening.